title this morning is John's favorite teacher. But before we look at the passage, I have a question for you. So, how many of you had to introduce someone important to you in your life to somebody else? Just raise your hand. A few. Yeah. So we do that sometimes for at work. We do that in our life. We do that also in business because we want somebody we know to do work for somebody else. So in all those cases, the purpose is to talk about the person who is important to us in a way that he sounds so great that the person who want to do business with them, that somebody would want to listen to them, and if it's a friend, somebody would want to be friends with them. So this morning, we're going to look at John's favorite teacher. And it's going to be, well, we read the passage already. It's John 1, 1 to 5. So let me introduce you John. John was one of the 12 disciples. He was one of those who wrote one of the 4 Gospels. And then he referred himself in John as being the disciple that Jesus loved. And the introduction that John is giving us of Jesus is different from all the other Gospels. And this is how he starts. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. No, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So when we hear the beginning, we immediately think about Genesis. So now, before we do that, let's just look at the passage one more time. There's the Word that comes to us. He appears 3 times. So we have, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So we know when we look at the Bible, if a word is repeated many times, it means it is important. So I went and looked at the definition of the word. And it comes from the Greek, which is logos. And apparently the definition is a word, a statement, a speech. So now, let's go with me in Genesis 1:3. And then before we read Genesis 1:3, Genesis, the book of Genesis, is the only time we get to see God without men. Because man was not made when Genesis, this part of Genesis that we're going to read, man was not made yet. And then it says, 1:3, then God said, let there be light, and there was light. So God spoke, and it happened. And then now if we go again to Genesis 1:9, then God said, let waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. So again, the word of God, he spoke it, and it happened. And then we're going to go to verse 1:12. No, 1:11, sorry. And then God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruits trees on the earth bearing fruit after their kind, with seed in them, and it was so. Again, God spoke, and it happened. And so, when John is saying at the beginning of Genesis, it was the Word, which was the Word of God, and he spoke it, and it happened. And remember, what John is doing for us now, he's giving us an introduction of his favorite teacher. Okay? So now, that was confusing for me because the first part was okay. In the beginning, the Word. But the second part, when he said the Word was with God, and then the Word was God. So God spoke with God, and He's God. So it was just confusing. Then I looked at another definition of the Word, and it says it is like Lego, kind of the toy that the kids are playing with, that word. And the word means to say, something being said. Okay? So now, let's go one more verse in Genesis, which is 1:26. Okay, we're going to keep it there. So now, remember, we have, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And I'm saying the new word that we learned in Greek, which is lego, means to say. And then after looking at the passage again with the word, I think the word could be conversation. And the reason I say that is when we read Genesis 1:26, it says, then God said, let us make man in our image. So before, God was talking and it happened. In verse 3, in verse 6, in verse 9, and in verse 11. But now, God added more people and he said, let us make. So he's making men. Men are not there. So man is not there to say, we were there. No, we were not there. Then who was God talking to? So this is why I say, then if we go back now and change, I know I'm not supposed to change. We're just going to do it for today for my explanation, okay? I'm not changing the Word of God. We're just trying to understand it. So if we go back and we say, in the beginning was a conversation. The conversation was with God, and God was in the conversation. And then the next part, which is verse 2, he was in the beginning with God. So John is telling us the teacher, his favorite teacher, was in the conversation that God was having when he said, let us make men in our image. So basically, God was always there because man, we did not create the word. We did not create speech because God was already talking before he made us. So it means God had knowledge, intelligence to be able to talk before man was made. So that's my first point, that the teacher that John is telling us about is God, and he was before the creation, and he was during creation. That's the first one. Then now, the second part, which is verse 3, if we have it. So it says, all things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. Okay, that's another confusing part. So into being, in the ESV version, they replace it by made. And then if I ask you today, if you know somebody who make stuff, all of you would say yes. All of us, we have a phone, either iPhone, Samsung. So those companies, they make phones, right? But they don't make anything like God makes them. Because what he's saying here is all things were made through him. So what he means by that is that everything that he made, he is in them as well. So basically, I'm going to try to explain that to you. If we look at, for example, an iPhone, there are so many different versions. Why? Because the one you have now was better than the one you had before. Basically, they never make something that could last forever. But he does. He makes the earth that we live on, that most of us, or parents or grandparents, and before them, they passed and the earth is still there. Because he made it, and it was through him. So that's one. And the other thing too is whatever he made, because it's through him, he has control over it. So we're going to look at some passage of that. The first one is going to be in Matthew 14, verse 25. So in Matthew, the disciple, or with Jesus, they were with Jesus. Jesus told them to go ahead. And then, in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. So he made the sea, and he could walk on it. Can any of you walk on the sea? No, we can't, because we didn't make it, right? The other one is Matthew 14, 28. And Peter, when he saw that, Peter said to him, Lord, if it is your command, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. Peter was able to walk on water. Peter is a man just like you and me. And the only reason he was able to walk on water is because he was made through God, and God allowed him to walk on water. Again, Mark 4, verse 39. Lazarus was dead. And the word says, and he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, no, before that, sorry. Okay, I'll read it. So Mark, no, that's okay. So, sorry, Mark 14, 28. We went to that one. Okay, we're going to do Jesus quiet the storm. So this one is, it was when there was a storm, Jesus was sleeping, and then the disciple thought they were dying. And Jesus awoke. He got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, hush, be still. And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm. Again, the wind obeys him because it was made through him. And the next one, John 11:43, Lazarus was dead. And in John it says, when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus came back to life. So Lazarus was made through him, and he called him out of death back to life. So that's the first part, that all things were made through him. And the second part, John is saying, without him was not anything made that was made. So basically what he's saying is, he's challenging us. Can we find something in this world that Jesus or God is not in it? Can we? We can't. Now, you might say, well, I make things. I made them. God is not in them. Let's say you say, I made a house. God is not in it. But if Jesus were to say, okay, I'll take my tree back. There is no house. Because your house is made with trees. But if you say, I went and bought a new car from the dealership, it's mine. I paid for it. Jesus is not in it. And Jesus would say, really? Let me take my medals. You'll have no car. Even us, the life that we have, yes, we all have a mom and dad, but we were made through him. If he takes his life out of us, there is no us. So again, John is telling us this morning that his favorite teacher, that he's introducing to us, in him all things were made. And without him, there's nothing that was made that he was not in it. And for that part, there's another passage at tells us exactly that. It's Colossians 1:16. This one, let's read it together. Together. For by him all things were made, heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions, or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. All things. The government, part of all things. Authorities, part of all things. All things has been created through him and for him. So this is again the teacher that John is introducing to us. And then, in the last part, verse 4 to 5, it says, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. In him was life. We saw that when Jesus brought back to life Lazarus. So he was able to give him life. And John is saying here, the life was the light of men. But we all know, in order for us to get light, you need a power source for that light. And John is saying, Jesus, his teacher, is the power source because he is life. So we're going to look at John 8:12, where the teacher is saying exactly that. And then Jesus said, and Jesus again spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world. So the teacher is the light of the world. Now we're going to jump into John 12, verse 46. And it says, I have come as light into the world. Again, the teacher is light. There is light in him. And he has come as light. And then one more in John 14, verse 6. The teacher again is talking. I am the way and the truth and the life. Again, life. So John is saying the teacher is life, and not only because he's life, he is the source of light for man. Now, the last part. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So if I were to ask you, what is darkness? Yes, absence of light. Darkness is absence of light. And if you remember or if you have went through the different gospel, the Pharisees, they wanted to do one thing. They wanted to kill the light because they want to stay in darkness. So us as men, we are born in darkness because we don't know Jesus when we're born. Not only that, we can even speak when we are born. We can even understand when we are born. So that's why Jesus has to be our light. And the problem with darkness is when you are in darkness, the only way for you to get out of darkness is to see light. And if I were to close the light in this sanctuary right now and then ask you to go somewhere, you would not be able to do it unless you would take out your phone and then do it. So darkness is the absence of light, which is the absence of life, which is the absence of Jesus. And a lot of us I was in darkness until I saw the light. But it's not enough for you to see the light, because you have to go to the light. Because when you are in darkness, even if it's a little light that you could see at the door, if you don't walk to it, you will not be in the light. So again, John is saying the teacher is the light of the world. So now, to conclude, John introduced to us his favorite teacher. And again, like I said before, the purpose of an introduction is to lead to actions. It's not for knowledge to say, well, I know the greatest person ever and do nothing about it. John was an example of that. He followed Jesus. He did exactly what the teacher told him to do. And we today are benefiting from what he did. He wrote many books in the Bible. Jesus even told him what was going to happen later at the end. So the teacher is God. He made everything. He is in everything. He is the source of light. And he has come for us men to be leaving the darkness. And the last part of the last verse is that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And we all know today we took the Lord's Supper, that he is no longer on the earth, but he is with the Father. And what John experienced is still available for each one of us here. So there is much hope because Jesus' life was everything and is everything for us. And I'm going to finish with this passage, John 14, verse 1 and 4. Do not let your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in the teacher. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you, for I go to prepare a place for you, for me, for us. If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may also be. There we may also be. And you know the way where I am going. The teacher is the light. His word is the light. And we have his word. So I invite you to spend time in his word. And if you don't have a Bible, look to your left, look to your right, find someone who has one and ask them to spend time with you in the Bible. Thank you.